back. WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. It was another lovely Sunday afternoon. It feels like sort of fantasy land as a Ravens fan who has witnessed this for 24 seasons. Luke Jones joins us now after yet another sort of garden variety beatdown of an AFC playoff-worthy opponent over at the Crab Cake. And, I think all of us who have any sort of depth or history with the franchise are starting to feel things that, honestly, this team's never done before with this kind of player, not even going back to Ray Lewis or the early part of Flacco or any specific season from 06 or magical Super Bowl carpet rides. This, from a regular season standpoint, I'm walking out of the locker room, Luke, on Sunday, and Ian O'Connor grabs me and says, they're the best team in the league by a wide margin. And I'm like, wow. And you see the media descending upon this. This is going to be an interesting thing to see the next 6-7 weeks here, Luke.
Yeah, I think back to where the Ravens were after the Week 6 win over Cincinnati. At that point, we were talking about this football team having right itself a little bit. They were 4-2 after the back-to-back poor defensive performances against Kansas City and Cleveland. But even then, they went to Pittsburgh, and they needed overtime to beat the Steelers with Devlin Hodges as their quarterback. And that Cincinnati game, even though they dominated it statistically, it was a 6-point game because of the kick return to start the game and just a couple mistakes here and there that kept them from really controlling that one from a point standpoint, from a scoreboard standpoint. But at that point in time, we talked a lot about where this team was going, knowing that 6 of their next 7 games were coming against teams with winning records. Well, 4 games into that, Nestor, they've won 4 games by a total of 101 points. Their average margin of victory over this gauntlet that we've talked about, over the first 4 games of this gauntlet that they were going to enter middle of the season, they're outscoring their opponent by roughly 25 points per game. That's where this team has been. It's one thing to do this against Miami. It's another thing to do this against Cincinnati, but it is a completely different conversation when you're going to Seattle and winning by a couple scores, beating the New England Patriots by 17 points, and facing a Houston Texans team coming off a bye with a quarterback that isn't someone like Tom Brady who has a stature because of what he's done in the past. And Deshaun Watson, much like Russell Wilson a few weeks ago, every bit the part of an MVP candidate here and now in 2019, and it wasn't just Lamar Jackson in the offense. We kind of forget that offense was sleepwalking in the first quarter by and large. But this defense, combined with an offense over the final 3 quarters, just completely demolished a team that entered the week as the number 3 seed in the AFC. The Ravens made them look like the JV, and it's impressive. And I don't know how anyone with any shred of objectivity. Now, you might be able to argue some other teams. Maybe you'd say they're as good as the Ravens, but I don't know how you could possibly argue anyone better than the Baltimore Ravens right now.
Have the Ravens ever been number 1 in power rankings in the mind of anyone or any fan ever? I can never remember a week where we woke up in the regular season and said we're the best team in football. It's just always been for someone else. And let's be honest, in the modern era with, the whole combination of the Aaron Rodgers and the Brett Favres and the Ben Roethlisbergers and the Tom Bradys and the Drew Breeses, these great players that, 12-2 was reserved for them. 9-1 was reserved for them. I really don't ever remember. I remember weeks waking up thinking we're pretty good and we're one of the best teams or one of the 8 teams or one of the 4 teams or, hey, maybe we can win 12 or 13 games this year. But this is the first time that this organization is literally beating down quality teams in the middle of a season to be on this sort of a roll in November. This is really unprecedented, Luke.
Yeah, again, and I've said this to you before, and I'm going to keep saying it because that was a hell of a good team that just completely fell on its face in the divisional round. 2006, the only year that, for me, comes close. I think you look at 2000, the way they finished, but they were 5-4 at one point. They had gone 5 straight games without scoring a touchdown. 2012, they were 8-2, so we're not in uncharted territory in that regard. But go back and look at that. They were winning so many games by the skin of their teeth, where you didn't really know how real it was. 2006, it was different than this because it was a defense that, to me, was not very far off the 2000 group, and they went 13-3. Other than that, you're right. There's nothing that even feels close. And even in 2006, save for maybe a week or two here or there, I think most people talked about the Chargers that year. I remember that was the big year that they had, where the Ravens gave them one of their few losses. So I think you're right in the sense that we're so used to, and when I say we, specifically talking about this fan base, this city, we're so used to hearing terms like flying under the radar, or being that underdog that no one wants to play in January, or someone that's not getting the proper respect. At this point in time, it's time to put those phrases aside, because I think anyone who has opinion that should be valued is giving the Ravens their props at this point, because that's how good they are. And again, I don't know how you can not look at this team over the last month and see how they've won in convincing fashion. I mean, they've won 4 straight games now by multiple possessions. This is starting to, right now, this reminds me, watching this football team, it's like watching Alabama or Clemson or someone like that in the first month of the season in college football. They're just beating the pants off everyone. But the difference is they're not playing Troy. They're not playing some FCS school that's getting a payday. This was Seattle. This was New England. This was Houston on Sunday. So they're not just winning, but they're winning in such convincing fashion that I look at this thing now and I say, okay, they're 8-2, and yeah, I know you still have to scoreboard watch a little bit in terms of New England and maybe a couple other teams in the AFC right now, but you look at this thing in terms of 3-game lead in the division with 6 to play. This division race is over. Cleveland's not good enough. Pittsburgh's not good enough. I mean, if the Ravens go in the tank to the point where this division race is suddenly in question, something's gone horribly wrong, and we're not talking about them winning the Super Bowl.
But I don't think any of these games in the next 3 weeks are easy. I know they're going to be favored like all that, and the 49ers are coming in here. I don't think this is a walk in the park for them to waltz to a bye. And certainly if they want the 1 seed, there needs to be a foot put down, because they just need to foot race the Patriots. I mean, week to week, and watching them play late into afternoons, and we're going to be playing national TV games, and we get Sunday off next week to sit around and watch games. So there's all of that going on, but I don't think you just waltz to a bye here. I think you still need to win games.
Well, of course they have to win games. Not suggesting they're resting their starters starting next week. I just mean at this point, who's going to beat them? I mean, seriously, make your argument for who's going to beat them.
I can't. I'm putting my hands over my ears. I'm like, don't talk like that, man. Come on, you're being crazy. Who's going to beat them? Let's start with the Rams next week and get ready for that.
Well, look, if you're going to ask me, do I think the Ravens are going to win now, or are they probably going to lose at some point between now and Week 17? I'm going to say, yeah, the law of averages tell you they're going to lose, but I'm not picking them to lose again until I see them lose again, because I picked a close game for them against Houston. And by the way, I want to be very clear about this. Deshaun Watson is a fantastic football player, and this defense made him look pitiful on Sunday. This secondary covered the way they did, allowing pass rush that kind of did it with the zone pressure, not really going after him all in, because he's the kind of guy that if he escapes the pocket, he's going to make it pay, just like Lamar Jackson does to teams on the regular. But they made him look sick. They made a team that maybe wasn't a top 5 team, but I think was a pretty strong consensus top 8, top 9 kind of team. Certainly in the top 10. One of the better teams in the AFC, which we know the AFC doesn't have a whole lot to write home about, and they made them look pitiful. So I hear what you're saying, and look, I've seen teams that looked awesome for long stretches of time suddenly not look that way anymore. And sure, the Ravens have to continue to play well and continue with the same focus that they've had, and they need to keep Lamar Jackson upright and healthy, because He's obviously their MVP, their most important player by an incredible margin.
Yeah, we would say there's a guy that's the franchise, right? Like, wait, that's the franchise,
sure.
literally.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even close. I mean,
doesn't make you comfortable, but you're glad he's on your team, right?
Sure. But, I mean, any team in the league now, save for a few, those other quarterbacks that you're talking right now in the MVP discussion, the Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, Sunday notwithstanding, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, let's not forget about him just because he missed a couple games. But other than that select group right there, every other team in the NFL right now is looking at Lamar Jackson and saying, boy, we had a chance to draft him, and we didn't. And look where we are right now, whether you're talking about one of these teams with a rookie or, with a second-year quarterback, or one of these teams that has kind of a middle-of-the-road, average to slightly above average starting quarterback, or one of these teams that's just in complete purgatory right now with, no direction and no success. All these teams, save for a few, are all looking at the Ravens with such envy, such jealousy that they have Lamar Jackson. And that's what's just amazing about this story, because any team in the league, including the Ravens, who passed on him as well, could have had him, and they didn't take him for whatever reason. So other than the teams that have a franchise quarterback, an established quarterback that helps you win games and has you in a position where you're jockeying for a playoff spot, every other team in the league is envious of what the Ravens have right now. So it's not to say that it can't be stopped for an individual game. In fact, you look at Sunday's game, the Ravens' offense was completely out of sync. But here's the thing. With the way this team is playing on both sides of the ball, Houston missed their opportunity in the first quarter. If they had jumped out to a 14-0 lead, then we're asking a question about this offense that we really haven't had to answer very frequently this year. Kansas City, the Cleveland game was even very close until the last 10 minutes when the Browns just kind of went nuts and the Ravens just kind of turtled up and realized it was over. But that was their chance to jump out to a lead, which is what you have to have against this football team. And they didn't do it. The Ravens offense found their footing, and it was all over after that. So I hear exactly what you're saying. And again, if you're asking me to bet, if you're asking me to wager, sure, I'll wager that the Ravens probably lose another game between now and the end of the season.
I think bad weather, a muddy game, a snowy game, a game where the ball gets kicked around a little bit. There's a lot of ways to lose. I don't think they're going to lose to the Cleveland Browns later in the year, but I do think the next couple of weeks they are going to continue to see playoff caliber teams, and I think it's hard to go out there and beat playoff caliber teams by 30 points every week, even though they've done it the last couple of weeks. I don't think that ever gets garden variety, man. Like I week to week, I don't think it's easy to look this good for that long. I don't know that it's sustainable to look this good for that long, honestly.
Well, if you're asking me if they're going to beat all these teams by 30 points, then yes, I'll agree with you on that. But if we're just talking about winning football games, I mean, who on the schedule right now do you look to and say, I think the Ravens are going to lose to that team? Now, could the Ravens lose?
I think they're going to go 16-0 every year.
Well, hey, you know me. I'm not Mr. Colored glasses where I'm going to pick them to win every week.
That's why I'm having fun with you, because I've never seen you this sort of bullish, quite frankly, on the purple.
I mean, I look at how this team's trending at this point. The offense has been at a phenomenal level now for. I mean, even if you want to go back and say, okay, and even in the Seattle game, keep in mind, they had 2 defensive touchdowns in that game. So it's not as though they played lights out, unbelievable offensive football in Seattle. They did what they needed to do. But since then, coming off the bye week, you hang 37 on New England, you hang 49 on Cincinnati. You do what they did on Sunday, 41 points against Houston. And unlike the previous weeks, we weren't talking about defensive touchdowns in this game. They just were that good. And you look at it, Houston didn't have a bad defense. Now, they didn't look very good on Sunday, but
well, certainly not against the run. I mean, they were just gashed
yeah,
on big runs, and that was the end. And more than that, didn't take advantage. Missed a field goal, then the Ravens missed a field goal, and
sure.
then the pick across the middle with our boy Josh Bynes. By the way, Josh Bynes joining us at Adams Jeep up in Aberdeen on Monday night. I want to see everybody out there to say hello to Josh. And he does not have his Super Bowl ring from the last time. He said he wants to get another one. He'll bring that one out. but picking the ball off across the middle. I mean, things happened to really sort of pile up on the Texans. It got late early for them, I think.
Yeah, and I think look, you go on the road against a really, really, really good football team like the Ravens are. I mean, this does happen. It's happened to the Ravens even in some of their better seasons. Let's not forget, 2012, the Ravens went to Houston early, what was that, October, I guess it was, and it was very similar to what we saw on Sunday, and the Ravens won the Super Bowl that year. So let's, I'm not by any means burying the Houston Texans here, but I think you just look at what happened in that game in the first quarter. Like I said, Houston had their opportunity, and certainly they can point to what absolutely was pass interference on Marlon Humphrey on the Hopkins play to the end zone that replay didn't overturn, because we know that replay doesn't overturn pass interference. But you look at
I was
that
110
play,
yards away, and he was draped on him, man.
I mean, it was absolute. I mean, that was obvious, but it speaks to how much of a joke this whole replay system thing has been. And also a reminder that next time anyone complains about officiating screwing the Ravens and there being some conspiracy, just remember that play.
Got an edge.
At the very least.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think, again, I mentioned this point a few minutes ago, and I'll emphasize it. If you want to have a chance to beat the Ravens at this point in time, as we're talking about right now, with the way they're playing, how confident they are, the way they're constructed, you have to jump on them early. You have to hope that Lamar Jackson comes out a little erratic, which he did in the first quarter. He was 1 for 6, even though one of those incompletions was the Nick Boyle drop. But they started slow, and Houston had their chance to jump out to a 7-0 lead, a 10-0 lead, and kind of right themselves, but they didn't. And I think what would probably be most discouraging if you're Bill O'Brien is they were coming out of the bye week. I mean, that we know that teams, even bad teams often, if you look at over recent history, you'll find some not-so-good teams come out and play really well coming out of their bye week because they're fresh physically. They have had an extra week to prepare, and I think that was one point that Matthew Judon made, just kind of talking about this Ravens offense, because this Ravens defense has gone up against Lamar and this group since OTAs, and he even pointed out the Texans had an extra week to prepare for him, and all right, maybe early on they did some good things and slowed it down, but it didn't last for long, and it just speaks to how difficult this team is to stop. And now, when you couple that offensive performance with a defense that is seemingly getting better every week, and again, I think it starts in the secondary with having Marcus Peters now and having a healthy Jimmy Smith and stabilizing some of their other positions of concern, it just makes everything else that much simpler. It makes what other issues you might have on defense, because this isn't, even with 6 sacks on Sunday, I still don't think this is a great pass rush. I think if you looked at it, I mean, Matt Judon said himself that his first sack was not some great pass rushing move. It was the coverage on the back end that he was able to get to the quarterback. But I think you just look at this team and it reminds you of last year, only the volume being turned up, that now it feels like they're playing complementary football again, where you have an offense that's overwhelmingly better than it was last year in terms of explosiveness and points scored and just doing what they want for the most of the game. And now you have a defense that didn't do it quite as much on Sunday as far as scoring defensive touchdowns, but is capable of doing that. They're taking the ball away with interceptions. They had a strip sack. I mean, it's really scary to play this team if you're the opposing team on a given week, because it's so different from an offensive standpoint, and you have a defense that has more and more confidence every week. So, again, I'm not trying to be dismissive of the rest of the schedule, but what I'm going to say in reply to every game that's left on their schedule, every single one of those teams is looking at the Ravens right now and saying, oh, my goodness, how the heck are we going to figure out that offense. How the heck are we going to score enough against that defense that's getting way better by the week, where we're going to be able to win a shootout? Because I think winning a shootout is what you have to do to beat this team at this point. And we thought maybe Deshaun Watson and the Texans would be able to do it, and it didn't come close.
Well, I mean, Gus was worth 100 yards. Lamar was worth 100 yards. Ingram was worth 100 yards through the air and on the ground and a couple of touchdowns. Andrews was worth 75 yards. But how multiple they are with Pat Ricard and with Nick Boyle, and to your point, him dropping a pass, and Hayden Hurst getting involved, and all of these guys are catching these 8 and 10-yard passes, and it's like 1,000 paper cuts. Like, every one of them's for a first down. Every one of them fires up the offense. Every one of them leads to the next run to Mark Ingram, and it feels like all these guys were all over the field, but you look up, nobody caught more than 4 balls. But they all caught 2. They all caught 3, right? I mean, it takes a whole roll call to go through who's getting the ball and where they're getting it and how they're getting it. And then RG3 comes in and orchestrates a drive. So it really has been an amazing thing, because on their own, none of these guys are Pro Bowlers. Maybe Andrews in another system or whatever. Ingram was what he was in New Orleans. But together, the stats don't lie, and the tail of the tape 10 weeks into this doesn't lie. They have constructed something that's unique to what they want to do, which is just sort of pound you in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it's almost as though you have a puzzle with a bunch of different-looking pieces, a little unconventional, but then it's all fitting together, and you have something that's an absolute juggernaut. I mean, you're right. I mean, think about it.
Well, just mismatches, right? Like, Lamar's a mismatch. Hollywood's a mismatch. Those 3 tight ends are a mismatch. Pat Ricard and Nick Boyle bearing down on safeties to make room. It's a game of mismatches, right? Literally.
Well, I mean, it's scheme that creates these kind of mismatches. I mean, I think if you look at it just from knowing what someone knows about the typical NFL in 2019, knowing how important the passing game is, and consider the Ravens, their wide receivers on Sunday. Marquise Brown, 2 catches for 23 yards. Willie Snead, 2 catches for 13 yards. Seth Roberts, 1 catch for 15 yards. It was a touchdown, of course. Miles Boykin, 2 targets, no receptions. If you just look at that alone,
and say, how are you going to win like that?
You're thinking that team probably lost, and probably lost big, right? I mean, just knowing how, and I'm not saying wide receivers are everything, but just knowing how the game profiles elsewhere. But then you look at how the Ravens do it, and it's their tight ends that catch so many passes. I mean, I think about their first touchdown drive. Their tight ends did so much there. And then Seth Roberts, of course, catches the touchdown, but, it was Hayden Hurst, it's Boyle, it's Mark Andrews. I mean, you just see what these guys do. They throw to the backs, and we're seeing Mark Ingram do more as a receiver here in recent weeks. I mean, Pat Ricard had 3 catches. I mean, you're talking about a 300-pound fullback. It's very weird. I'm going to continue to use that word that we coined, last December or late November, whenever it was.
Embrace it.
It's still weird, but hey, I don't think there's any question anymore about how sustainable this thing is. Look, you can come up with a great game plan, and I'll buy that you can beat Lamar Jackson. I don't think he's going to go undefeated the rest of his career. I'm pretty sure no one's done that. So I'm pretty sure Lamar won't do that. But this idea of, quote, figuring this out or, quote, solving this, I think we've seen it now over the course of a full season between last year and this year, and no one's come close to doing that. I mean, the Chargers did it in the playoff game, sure. Cleveland did a nice job against them, sure. Kansas City more so outscored the Ravens in Week 3. So you're talking about a couple teams that have done. Chargers did an excellent job, and a couple other teams have done a pretty decent job against it. Other than that, no one stopped this thing. So as weird as it is, I think there is plenty of sustainability, because it comes down to this. It's just, we've used this example before, and I'll continue to use it. What team is going to devote all the resources required to try to, and I emphasize try to stop this offense, because it's so much different. It's just like Navy in college football. You're not going to have someone recruit just to beat the Navy offense when you have 11 other games on the schedule. So it really does kind of create a competitive advantage from that regard that the Ravens have created for themselves legally. Nothing nefarious, just thinking outside of the box. And it's something that I feel has a lot of staying power. And, with all the scheme and all the, the idea of doing something unconventional, you have a quarterback who's continuing to improve. And after the first quarter, when he was 1 for 6, Lamar Jackson over the final 3 quarters until he was pulled for Robert Griffin, 16 of 18, 210 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, we can keep talking about his passing if you want, but he keeps answering those questions. And while I'm not anticipating him being a guy who's going to throw 40 or 50 times a game anytime soon, maybe he will at the end of his career, I don't know, but people that continue to pick apart his passing in less than flattering ways, I just don't know what you're watching because he's making throws. I mean, some of the throws that he made, that throw to Andrews, the touchdown late in the second quarter, he climbed the pocket. I mean, that was masterful the way he did that. It was a good pocket, and no one had broken open right away. He climbed the pocket. He did exactly what you want a quarterback
Yeah, but the
to do
thing
in that
about him
situation.
is he's not out there slinging it 40, 50 times a game to sort of wow you because he doesn't need to. But when he needs to throw the ball, when he needs to throw the ball or when they want to throw the ball, he throws the ball. And, dude, one other thing about him, back in the pocket passing, when he does drop back and it looks more traditional, man, the way they rush him, they are scared to death to get behind him.
Sure.
And
Of
so
course.
it creates a situation where it's very, very difficult to get a pass rush on him because he'll step up and 23 yards later, you got safeties running into cornerbacks, landing on linemen. Dude, he stretchered a guy trying to chase him.
Yeah.
He put a guy on a cart trying to chase him. I mean, I ain't never seen anything like that, bro. I mean, I'm going to be
Yeah.
honest with you. I've never seen anything like that. It
Well,
was like a Benny Hill episode, man.
And I don't want to see anyone literally get hurt chasing him as much
Obviously.
as we use the term breaking ankles. But yeah, that's why I said, I mean, I will never stop being amused by seeing a defender in the open field act like he has any chance to bring down Lamar Jackson. I mean, you might as well just throw your hands up and be like, see, Lamar, I have no chance. I mean, unless you have this guy in a phone booth, you're not catching him in that situation. I mean, you're not. I don't care who you are. There might be, I don't know, maybe a couple defenders in the entire league who might have a prayer to do that. So I'll never stop being amused to see that. But, I mean, how about the fact that he reels off a 39-yard run that might have been better than last week's if he had finished it off with a touchdown. It's kind of a step behind that in that regard, but another highlight run. But, again, I continue to be impressed by what we're seeing from him as a passer. And you're right, there isn't a volume that's required where he has to throw it 40 times. But since when was the NFL, winning a certain way predicated by having to throw a certain number of times? I mean, it's not as though he's only throwing 4 passes out there. This isn't, this isn't an option quarterback who's going 3 of 5 for 60 yards. This is a guy who is showing plenty of competence. He's showing good accuracy. He goes through progressions. I saw a great piece on Football Outsiders last week breaking down some throws and how he's reading coverages and knowing what to do against certain coverages. I mean, this is a far more sophisticated passer than his critics, even at this point, want to give him credit for, and he's only getting better. So, yeah, I mean, are you going to have him throw 40 times? No, because you can see him run 9 times for 86 yards and put some guy on the sideline because no one can catch him. So it's a lot of fun for anyone watching it. It's certainly a lot of fun for the Ravens and their fan base, and it's an absolute nightmare for any other team because I'll go back to what I've said before. He's that pitcher with 100-mile-per-hour gas and a 91-mile-per-hour slider, and he's got a great changeup. And, the first few times you see it, and that's going to be the big question over the next couple of years as teams see him more and more. Are they any more effective? I don't think they're figuring it out, but are they any more effective? Can they adjust a little bit here and there? Maybe. I don't even know if that's the case, but I'll continue to say this, and that's why I look at the Rams, and I look at the 49ers, and I look at the Bills, and I look at the Jets, and then, okay, the last 2 weeks of the season, that's a little bit of a different conversation. But those other four teams, they haven't seen Lamar Jackson. So that right there is why I'm going to say they're not going to stop him, because the first time you see Lamar, you're not ready for it, no matter how much tape you watch or how many great schemes some harebrained coach thinks he has come up with to stop him, because you don't know what you're dealing with until you see it. Same with that star pitcher who has insane stuff. Until you step in the batter's box and you see it a few times, you're not going to have a chance. And only after you see it a few times, maybe you'll have a little bit of a chance. And that's kind of where teams are with Lamar Jackson and this offense right now. It's just the truth. The proof is in the numbers. This isn't me talking with purple-colored glasses. Just watch the games, look at the numbers, see for yourself.
Luke Jones, true believer. We'll be out at Adams Jeep in Aberdeen on Monday night with Josh Bynes. Come on out, say hello. We're going to be around all week long as we get ready for the Los Angeles Rams. I got a big week ahead. I've never been to the LA Memorial Coliseum, so I am excited about that. Lots of Ravens fans going out, tailgating. Apparently it's going to be 60-some degrees, which is an upgrade. Hey, man, cold weather, warm weather. The Ravens are doing it in every kind of weather. Baltimore Positive doing it on Thursday. We'll be back at State Fair. Sonia Santa Lee. We're going to talk education in Baltimore City. Also going to have Speaker of the House Adrian Jones join us in advance of all things Annapolis in the State Assembly. And that is all on Thursday at State Fair this week. It's crazy. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, everywhere out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.